right, everyone, welcome back to part 2 of Baseline to Baseline with Alister Albert. If you are just returning for the first time for the season, Happy New Year to you. If you missed part 1 of this episode 9, you need to go check it out. Go back and check out what was discussed so far. I laid out what I think is the new schedule for Baseline to Baseline for the rest of this season. We're going to have 4 sessions or 4 recordings of the show for the regular season. This is recording 1. Second recording is going to be during the All-Star break, like we said, and the 3rd and 4th will be somewhere between March and April. So look out for that. Then we spoke about, of course, the unpredictability of the start of any NBA season. Bradley Beal, who's the top scorer so far for the NBA, which is a bit of a surprise. We don't know if that will be sustainable, but he has a lot to do for his team with his points. And then we spoke about Steph Curry, who's kind of come back and rounded out into some sort of recognizable form with his shooting, with his 62 points, scoring against the Portland Trail Blazers, and then his average of 28 points per game so far. So that was part 1, and now we're on into part 2, where we're going to talk about a little more about players and some of their performances so far. But what I'm really going to stress on right now is players who are really overperforming or overachieving or are in the spotlight right now for how good they have been playing. And I'd like to specifically call out 3 players. Jerami Grant of the Detroit Pistons. If you remember, he was with the OKC Thunder 2 years ago. Then he moved over to the Denver Nuggets and had a really great year there. They really wanted to re-sign him, but he bet on himself and left and went to the Detroit Pistons, signed a long-term contract with the Pistons. The Christians. I think they need Christ in their life for real. Not the Christians, the Pistons. The Detroit Pistons. And he's almost like the de facto number 1 option on that team. Jerami Grant right now is averaging 25, 6, and 2. 25 points, 6 rebounds, 2 assists. He's 14th in the NBA in scoring. Jerami Grant has never sniffed 20 points per game in his career. Right, the second biggest output that he had scoring in the NBA was when he was with OKC that last season as a 6th man with Carmelo Anthony and Paul George and Russell Westbrook, and he scored 13.6 points a game. So this dude has now upped his average by 12 points, and he's now averaging 25 points a game for the Detroit Pistons, who also have Blake Griffin on that team, but Blake is a shell of his former self, and now by default Jerami Grant has become the de facto number 1 option. So Jerami Grant, I'll definitely like to call him out. Then we have Julius Randle for the New York Knicks. He's averaging 22, 11, and 7. Now, I was really surprised at his scoring average and how well he's played. But that is clearly attributed to the fact that Tom Thibodeau, as their head coach right now, are getting them to play more structured basketball. They play a lot more defense. They're playing hard and competitive. These are not guys who are coming into games and if they're down by 5 or 10 points, they're ready to give up and kind of throw in the towel. These guys are playing hard and playing to the end of games, almost playing a full 48 minutes, trying to be competitive across the way. And that's the hallmark of any Tom Thibodeau team. And Tom Thibodeau has a knack for taking teams who you not expect very much from and get them into the playoffs. If you remember what he did with the Minnesota Timberwolves, he was able to get them into the playoffs after a really long drought of not being in the playoffs. Of course, he had Jimmy Butler and Karl Anthony Towns on that team. I kind of attribute a lot of that success to Jimmy Butler, but that's another story. But the Knicks are in position to be a playoff team this year. And if I just have a really quick look at the rankings, the New York Knicks are doing really well. So like Julius Randle, like I said, he's playing at a ridiculous clip, and the 22 points per game average I thought was a far above what he's ever produced. But when I checked back, he actually scored 21.4 points with the Pelicans, his last team before he was traded to the Knicks. And then last season he scored 19.5 for the New York Knicks. Of course, they were bereft of offensive talent, and he was like the main guy there since he's been there. So he's scored at over 20 points a game before, but just generally he's played a lot more dominant and they're winning. So right now the Knicks, looking at my the standings really quickly, they are now 5-6. They're playing 500 ball. The Knicks playing 500 ball at this point. They're 9th in the East right now. We're used to the Knicks being like in the teens, 12th, 13th in the East out of 15 teams, but the Knicks right now are playing competitive ball and they're actually in the hunt for a playoff berth if they could keep up their momentum and play really well. Of course, you have their rookie Obi Toppin, Alfred Payton, who's always been a really good, solid role-playing point guard, who's a starting caliber point guard, and he's played really well. Alec Burks coming off the bench and could put up 20 points any night. Mitchell Robinson, the center, who has been a really good center for them the last couple of years, and the Knicks are playing really well. And he right now, Julius Randle, is 32nd in the league. There's so many guys scoring 20 plus points a game this season and for the last couple of seasons. So his 22 points per game is not really impressive, 32nd in the league, but he needs to be called out. And then the last person I really want to call out, there are guys like Colin Sexton, who's playing really well for the Cleveland Cavaliers, but the last person I think really needs to shine a light on is Gordon Hayward. Gordon Hayward, to me, has returned to all-star form. We last seen him average 21.9 points in Utah. That was the year he became an all-star for the first time, and now he's averaging 22, 5 and 4 for the Charlotte Hornets as the main option, alongside Devontae Graham, Terry Rozier, and the exciting LaMelo Ball. And so the 22 points per game is 28th in the NBA right now, but he has the Hornets playing really, really well, and cohesive. The guys have had 1 year under their belts before Gordon Hayward came in with James Borrego as the head coach, and they've developed a system of play that seems really good. And many people were kind of nervous about the LaMelo Ball pick at number 3 at the draft last year, but so far it's paying off. LaMelo has played really well, and alongside Gordon Hayward has the Charlotte Hornets playing very competitively as well. And looking at the standings in the East, the Charlotte Hornets at 6-5 are 6th in the East. But again, like I said at the start of the show, in part 1, don't get carried away so early in the season. They might just revert to being the Charlotte Hornets of old and kind of become really crappy and not closing out games and kind of end up in the 12th, 13th, 14th seeds in the East again. But I think it's a dawn of a new day in Charlotte with LaMelo Ball and Gordon Hayward with his $120 million max contract. Was it max? No, it wasn't a max. It was just a really hefty contract, moving from the Celtics to the Charlotte Hornets as the number 1 option. So these 3 guys, Grant, Randle and Hayward, I think they will be all-stars this year. Now, we don't know what's going to happen with the All-Star game this season. Of course, the NBA has cancelled the All-Star weekend festivities, which was supposed to be in Indiana this year, and they have cancelled the All-Star game, of course, because of the coronavirus pandemic. They want to be responsible and not have super spreader events where people are congregating in stadiums, for dunk contests and all that sort of stuff. So there will be no All-Star games this year, but I think ceremonially, and to kind of continue the tradition of having All-Stars, it hasn't been said yet, but I think the league will continue to have All-Star selections for guys who have played really well for the first half of the season. So I think so far, if they continue at their pace, Grant, Randle and Hayward will become All-Stars this year. And for Grant specifically, it's kind of like what happened with Trae Young last year. Trae Young played so well for the Hawks, and they were like one of the bottom teams. They were like 13th or 14th in the East, but he played so well they had to recognize him, and he was he was voted in as a starter for starters. But Grant, he probably won't be voted in as a starter, but I think with the level of play that he's had, even as one of the worst teams in the East, he'll probably get called in as a reserve. So These are the three guys I think so far who have played at the all-star level who need calling out. And yes, it's just all East guys. Everyone in the West that who are playing at all-star level are guys you'd expect them to be playing at an all-star level. So Paul George, Kawhi, Nikola Jokic, Jamal Murray possibly could make an all-star team. CJ McCollum, who I think is second or third in the league in scoring right now, has played out of his mind. He's kind of outplayed in terms of offensive production for the Portland Trail Blazers. Can he become a first-time all-star this year? It's very possible if he kind of keeps it up and the Blazers continue to do as good as they do. Maybe CJ McCollum might be an all-star reserve this year because he's not going to be a starter. We all know starters is like a popularity contest, so CJ McCollum is not going to be a starter, but possibly he can make his first all-star squad this year. So let's see what happens there. But Grant, Randle and Hayward, look out for them. I think they're going to be all-stars this year, so mark my words. Mark this down. Alister Albert said Grant, Randle and Hayward are going to be all-stars in 2021. Right, so that's the stuff I kind of wanted to call out in terms of players who've kind of really stood out for me at this point in time in the season. And now we're going to go into something I'd like to debut, and I'll put it up on screen for you, which I would like to call the baseline to baseline power rankings. Now, of course, anyone who follows the NBA, reads articles and watches the shows, there are all these ESPN power rankings, NBA power rankings. All the analysts kind of put their stuff together, and it would be really wrong of me as someone who used to write and analyze officially basketball for Bleacher Report and talking about the sport and not have my own power rankings table. So I've kind of put together a power rankings table, which is a little bit subjective, and it's dated. The rankings are as at last night, so the 12th of January 2021. So games played up until that point, and like I said, most teams have played like 9 to 12 games so far. So these are just my rankings at this point, purely subjective. It's going to be a bit of a mixture of how they've played so far with what their standings are, what I think, what the eye test looks like to me, how well they've played, potential for the rest of the year, injuries and all that sort of stuff. So it's a combination of a lot of different factors that have contributed to what I think these rankings are at the start of this year. So if you look at the NBA power rankings as a comparator, the NBA rankings, league rankings are purely based on, games played and, wins and losses basically. My power rankings, like I said, take into account what I think subjectively about different teams, injuries, how well they've played, potential, and that sort of thing. So that's what that is. So if we put up the power rankings on screen, you will see, some familiar things. So what we would notice here, there's the columns. We have, of course, what the ranks are. So 1 to 15 on the left hand side, and then 16 to 30 the teams bottom half towards the right. The teams, of course, the movement column, of course, there's no movement just yet because this is the first edition of this table, so there's no movement. When we move on to the second recording for this season, we will see what movement there is, because I will update the table for each episode and kind of give my take on where I think certain teams have moved, who has risen and who has fallen on the table basically. So we'll kind of chart the movement there, and the last position that teams were at in comparison to their new position they're into the table now. So I think this is a fairly clear table to understand. So if you want to check it out, you could go to Instagram. I'll put the table up there so you could kind of check it out and look at it and rip it to shreds and send your comments or whatever it is. You could go ahead and do that on Instagram and Facebook and all the other places. So of course, let's just get straight into it. So we have the Lakers on top. They've played really well so far, performing at a 75% clip, winning 9 of their 12 games so far. So the Lakers are on top. I think that kind of makes sense as the defending champions, and having LeBron James, who hasn't had much rest yet. He said he wanted to do a lot of load managing potentially to start off the season, but he hasn't had much rest yet. So the Lakers are at the top, 9-3 wins so far. And then I have the Clippers, Boston and Sixers trailing after them. Now, of course, like I said, if you look at the NBA rankings, the league rankings, if you go to NBA.com, open the app or whatever, you could see the difference. We have the top four for mine. You could see what they are here. And on NBA.com, it's the Lakers, Boston, Philly, and Indiana. Now, of course, like I said, that's based on them just looking at games played and wins and losses. But based on how I think the teams have played so far, what I've seen, potential, what I think the momentum will be for some of these teams going forward. I think the Clippers have been second, although they had that horrendous loss, losing by 50 points at the start of the season, which hasn't been really good. Boston has looked really good. Boston has been a team on the rise. Jason Tatum has shown to be, he's ready to just consistently be a perennial all-star and team leader. Jaylen Brown, who should have been an all-star last year, I think he'll probably get in this year as well. He's kind of continued his pace of production and will kind of be the two-headed monster kind of leading that team. And Kemba Walker will be coming back. So I think Boston has a rightful place in the top three in these power rankings going, so far and going forward. The Sixers, they had their little issues there with Steph Curry, Seth, younger brother, Seth Curry, coming down with COVID, and then Tobias Harris, Joel Embiid, and Ben Simmons at different points in time having to quarantine and be away from games. But they've played really well. Shake Milton off the bench has done okay. Their surprise rookie Tyrese Maxey has come in, and played some spot minutes, and there was one game he went off for 39 points where the team only played like 7 players or whatever it was. So the rookie, like we say back home in St. Lucia, he's been force ripe, like a fruit that should take some time to ripen, but you maybe it's a GMO or something and it's ripe before its time, sort of thing. That's kind of what's happening with Tyrese Maxey. He's getting some really solid minutes and producing in those minutes, so he'll be a good player off the bench for them when the team gets healthy. The Bucks, they're getting their groove back. They're working their way back into form. Drew Holiday, of course, they had to acclimate him into the new system. DJ Augustine, Bryn Forbes, all the new guys they got in on the Bucks. So the Bucks are not right at the top right now, but they're number 5. They're getting there. They had a couple of losses to start the season that were not too great. 4 losses so far in the season, but they'll get there. Definitely the Suns. I have the Suns in at number 6, and they've just kind of continued the play that they had in the bubble. They went 8-0 in the bubble, as we know. They didn't make the playoffs itself, but they were great in the bubble to end last season, and they've just continued. Monty Williams has shown he's a proper coach. We all knew he was a great coach, but then the additions of Chris Paul, who took the Thunder, who nobody expected to be in the playoffs last year. Chris Paul has led the Suns back into competitive basketball alongside Devin Booker and Jay Crowder. Let me tell you something, people. Jay Crowder might never be a max player, but Jay Crowder deserves a lot of respect. From the time he was on the Celtics to when he moved to the Memphis Grizzlies, played for the Miami Heat last season, in the NBA Finals, even in his short stint for the Cavaliers, and I really thought the Cavaliers did themselves an injustice by trading Jay Crowder to Memphis at the time that they did with LeBron. Anywhere Jay Crowder goes, that team does well. He's a glue guy. He's a guy who produces. He could hit an open 3-pointer. He plays defense. He's a hard-nosed guy. Him and Jimmy Butler last year for the Miami Heat. It's kind of maybe a little bit of why they're struggling right now. A guy like Jay Crowder is a fundamental piece every team should have. And, the Suns have him and they're benefiting. I'm not going to say it's because of him, but he largely contributes to the success of the Suns right now, I believe so. The Suns are where they are. They're 6 on my rankings. Jazz, Indiana has played really good for their first year head coach, Nate Bjorkgren, I think his name is. So the Pacers have done really well. The Nets, I have the Nets at number 9, and they've kind of underachieved so far. Playing 500 basketball, 6-6. But like I said, I wanted to kind of reserve my comments on Kevin Durant for this section. And here we are, the Nets, Kyrie Irving. What's going on there? What the hell is wrong with Flat Earth Kyrie Irving? Kyrie has left the team, and there are multiple reports as to why he's left. He's not happy with what's happened, with recent riots happening in Capitol Hill in Washington in the US. He went over to a birthday party for his sister recently, and the NBA got video of him being maskless in a party, and he's probably now under investigation as to when he will return because of what he, being part of that and not wearing a mask. And he's just said it's personal reasons. There have been reports where Steve Nash has tried to speak to him and he's not returning calls or not willing to speak. It's just personal reasons. Kyrie Irving, for the last year or two, from the time he was with the Celtics, has been a little bit of a pain in the ass. And I think I have the right to say that, because I think a lot of people think that about him right now. Kyrie has been a bit of a pain in the ass. And it kind of just leads you to wonder what the hell is going to happen to this team. Kevin Durant came there for stability, and to play with Kyrie, and Kyrie's just messing about right now. And sure, he probably has his reasons as to why he doesn't want to play, and it might be all legitimate, but as a vice president of the Players Association, you need to set an example, and he's not doing that right now. So Kyrie has been, like I said, I'll say it for a third time, a pain in the I was about to curse, sorry. Kyrie has been a pain in the ass, and but in saying that, Kevin Durant, who was injured for a year and a half, almost 2 years, Kevin Durant, people, is back. Kevin Durant is back. He's averaging 29.9 points a game, 7.8 rebounds, 5.8 assists. That's 38 and 6. Okay, of course. Okay, yes, he. This is 12 games in, still early. Let's not, like we say, hype things up too early. But 38 and 6 for a guy who just came off an Achilles injury. Everybody wanted to know what the hell, would Kevin Durant do when he came back, and he looks like he's all the way back. For me, every time I see Kevin Durant explode to the rim, take a step back or something, I feel nervous for him. But he's not feeling nervous. He's playing hard and he is producing. The Nets have been underachieving though. They're 6-6. On the NBA rankings, they're 15th. NBA.com, but I have them on number 9 because I think they've played really well. Jarrett Allen, is now starting again, as he rightfully should, over DeAndre Jordan. Jarrett Allen is playing well. Karis LeVert is playing well. He's shown to be an excellent 6-man. And Bruce Brown is the point guard's name, I think, who played recently as a starter. He's been a fill-in starter for Kyrie Irving recently, sending Karis LeVert back to the bench as an offensive spark plug off the bench. And Bruce Brown has played really well. Kevin Durant complimented him really well for his play recently, and he might be the stopgap until Kyrie comes back. So the Nets here at 9. We have the Blazers at 10, who are playing really well. Dallas, are holding their own. They are currently 5-4, waiting for the return of Kristaps Porzingis, but they're playing all right. They're doing okay. And you have Luka Doncic, who is going to be an MVP in this league really soon. This team needs to be up there. So I have them at number 11. We'll see how far they go. We have the Warriors at number 12. Showing out so far with Steph Curry, with a record of 6-5, and they're plugging along. They're being competitive, and having Draymond and Steph back in the lineup with Kelly Oubre, with Andrew Wiggins, with James Wiseman, and all the rotation players off the bench. They've done all right. Again, I'm not gonna hype them up and I'm not gonna tear them down, but they're middle of the pack, and their record shows it. They're 6-5. Just across 500 ball, and if the playoffs started today, they would be in it. But at the end of the season, would they be the 6th, 7th, 8th seed? We don't know. Let's see what happens. The Nuggets are trying to fight their way back. They're 5-6. I have them at 13th here, and like I said, this is a subjective ranking. So there's some teams who have better. The Hornets, for example, have a better wins-loss record, but I think I will go with Nikola Jokic and the experience of that team as a better team than the Hornets right now, still, even with a losing record. So I have the Hornets at 13th. Magic, who are playing really well, scrappy team as usual under Steve Clifford. Who really unfortunate for Markelle Fultz, who was starting to play really well, and showing his potential as a number one pick, going out for the rest of the season with an injury. But the Magic continue to just move along. They're 14th on my table right now. The Spurs, of course, missed the playoffs last year. DeMar DeRozan had to go off to see family in Los Angeles. And guys like Deontay Murray, Lonnie Walker, and Keldon Williams. Let me get his name right. I am sorry. I really should know his name, shouldn't I? The rookie, Keldon Johnson, playing really well and providing some really good fantasy output for guys who play in fantasy sports right now. NBA, they're right there in the middle of the pack, 15th. I have the Hornets at 16th, Thunder 17th, Heat, the Miami Heat, Eastern Conference champions. They're just unable to get going right now. They're 4-5 in the league right now. They're just not there yet. They haven't gotten their groove back, and I will kind of partly attribute it to the fact that Jay Crowder isn't there, and of course he wouldn't be the reason why they would be at the top of the rankings if he was still there, but he would contribute to a scrappy, hard-nosed team that will kind of lead to win. So I'm not surprised they're not where they should be just yet. So the Heat are 18th, and we expect them to get back to where they need to, somewhere between the 4th, 5th, and 6th seed in the East. So as the season goes along, I expect the Heat to move up. So the next time we do these power rankings table, I expect the Heat to move up into the first half of these teams. And then you have the Knicks at 19th, which is rather high, I would think. On the NBA .com power rankings, or the league rankings, they're at 19th as well. So I think I got that right. The Knicks are right where they should be, playing competitive. I think we're normally used to the Knicks being somewhere in the 20s on the power rankings, but they're 19th and improving. 19th and improving, I think, is really good. The Cavs as well, like I said, they were like one of the first undefeated teams within the first 3-4 games, and they've come right back down to earth. The Cavs are now 5-7, playing really well though with Andre Drummond and Colin Sexton. Kevin Love hasn't really had much of an impact. He hasn't been playing as well, so the Cavaliers are where they are because of that. The Hawks, who started off blazing, are 21st. They're not doing too great. And there was a little bit of talk where John Collins was saying that he found Trae Young was holding the ball too long, and maybe contributed a little bit to the losses that they had. So they're at 21. Stan Van Gundy, in his first coaching season in the New Orleans Pelicans, is trying to find his way as well. So the Pelicans are still trying to make their way. And then the Rockets, man, what's going on there? James Harden recently came out after a press conference game where they lost to the Lakers and said the team is just not good enough. And of course, compared to the Lakers, they're not good enough, but he was alluding to the fact that he doesn't think that the team could be fixed. He doesn't think there's any hope for this team, basically. And John Wall clapped back basically and said, man, we've only played how many games? 9 games, and you're ready to jump off a cliff already? James Harden is checked out. James is just there to play for the team, collect his check, and just hoping to get traded. So James Harden is checked out. James Harden, like we said in episode 8, he's ready to move. He's ready to leave. So it's gonna happen at some point. The Grizzlies, 26. They're missing Ja Morant, who had an injury, who's out for 3 to 5 weeks, but should be back really soon. The Kings, doesn't surprise me. They're the 25th on my list. I will say that the Kings really do need to get rid of Luke Walton. I have never been a fan of Luke Walton as a coach, and I think they're standing right here and on the NBA list. On the NBA list, they're 20th, so I've kind of shortchanged them a bit based on rankings. They're 5 and 6 right now in games played and won and lost. But I just don't have trust in Luke Walton. I don't. Marvin Bagley is like a step away from an injury. De'Aaron Fox doesn't seem to be like a guy who could lead a team into the playoffs. Talented, but not there yet. Buddy Hield, he shoots really well, but Buddy Hield can be your number 2, I don't think. And then just to kind of close this off, the Raptors, Wizards, and Pistons. The Raptors, first-time champions 2 years ago. They are now 2-8. I think everyone is a bit surprised and disappointed by their start. But again, this is a long season, and they're just not there yet. We think Nick Nurse will be able to turn this around, and the next edition of this table, I think they will be in the first half. I would like to think that, because this team is too talented, too good, and too experienced now to be the 28th team on this list. The Wizards, man, the Wizards got Russell Westbrook, a previous MVP in the league, who's probably still in his prime. I'd say maybe just past his prime. You don't get an MVP who's just past his prime and be 2-8 to start a season. Scott Brooks, Luke Walton, watch out. You guys are going to be fired really soon if your teams continue to underachieve. And I think the Wizards probably would have gotten rid of Scott Brooks already. But I think they probably wanted to give him a chance because he was going to be coaching his former, player who had a really good relationship with him. Wanted to give him, Russell Westbrook and Bradley Beal, a chance together. But if the Wizards continue at this pace, Scott Brooks will be fired. And he will deserve to be fired, because this is not a good start. Wasting the output of 34.9 points from Bradley Beal and being the 29th ranked team in any ranking. On NBA.com, they are ranked at 28. So why are the Wizards down where they are? I don't know. Rui Hachimura, came back from injury. He's trying to get himself back, and you can't really depend on a second-year player. But hopefully, they'll be able to round into form. And then you have the Detroit Pistons, who I said need to probably be renamed the Detroit Christians, because they need some God in their life. They need divine intervention. Of course, Dwayne Casey is the coach of the Pistons, and you just think back of coaches from previous years. They had Stan Van Gundy before Dwayne Casey came in, and then there was John Lawyer, if anyone remembers John Lawyer. Maurice Cheeks was a coach for a little while there, and then Lawrence Frank. You had Flip Saunders before that, Larry Brown. The coaching tree since Joe Dumars left the Pistons to now has been Stan Van Gundy basically and Dwayne Casey, and the team has just underperformed. Jerami Grant is the only bright silver lining or star on this team right now. I honestly believe, and I'll say this with all certainty, that Blake Griffin, after the end of this year or the end of his contract, whichever comes first, should retire. It's not looking good. Blake Griffin will never be able to regain his Lob City stardom. I don't think. I think he's done. Maybe if he gets shifted to another team and he's like the third or fourth option on that team, maybe he'll have some value there. But to be the second or first option, they brought him in to be the first option, and now Jerami Grant is outshining him. I think Blake Griffin should, save his body, save his life and the rest of his life, and when his contract ends, retire. I don't think Blake has it anymore. He's not playing at a really good level. Of course, you have Derrick Rose on that team as well, but Derrick Rose, even if he's coming off the bench, I think plays better than Blake Griffin right now, playing with heart and energy. And that's not to say that Blake Griffin is not trying, but it's just not translating into wins right now. So there you have it. This is the first edition of the Baseline to Baseline Power Rankings. And like I said, this will change every episode, where I kind of give my take on the NBA landscape, or where I think people should be moving to and everything right now. So at the top, of course, Lakers, and at the bottom, the Pistons, and everyone in between that will move up and down. You'll see some arrows indicating movement on this table in the next editions, etc. So look out for this new segment, the Baseline to Baseline Power Rankings, as we go on. And I would like to end right here. This is the end of segment 2 and the end of this episode. And I'd like to thank you for listening. If you stayed, and listened, you really like basketball and you're supporting what I do, which is great. And thank you very much for staying and watching. And like I said, this will be the start of 4 episodes for this season until the playoffs start. Dates and guests will be announced when they are, confirmed. But thank you for watching this first episode for the new season. And like I said, check out Expose the Soul at Expose the Soul on Twitter or at x.posethesoul on Instagram. New sister website that kind of talks to sneakerheads all over the world, and we speak to Will Stowe. Like I said, check him out and his story on his life with sneakers and his just love for sneaker culture and everything that comes along with it. So this is Alister Albert signing out for Baseline to Baseline. Check us out on Instagram and elsewhere. Episode 2 coming up close to All-Star season break this year, so stay tuned. I'm gonna get off right now. Thanks for listening, and of course, tribute to Flying in memory of him. Rest easy, coach. Hard work pays off. Defense hoop. Alister Albert signing out.